Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to our virtual issue-based 2020 Legislative Priorities Town Hall. Thank you for everyone who's tuning in early. We are going to get started in about 3 minutes. For folks who have not joined us through Zoom before, you can unmute yourselves. If you're using a laptop, there's a mute function found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And for folks who are dialing in by phone, you can either press *6 or *67 to unmute yourselves.
Thanks, Trey. Thanks again to everyone who's joined. This is Sergio Spania with the ACLU of Maryland. And just again, a reminder, we're going to get started in a couple minutes. Thank you, everyone, for joining so far. But we want to make sure that as many people as possible can be participating before we get started.
Good evening for the folks who have just joined again. I'm Trey Murphy from the ACLU. We are going to wait a couple more minutes for a few more folks to join in. But for folks who are either joining by phone, you can press *67 or *6 to unmute yourselves. And then for folks who are joining by laptop, you're coming into the meeting already muted. And you can just press unmute yourselves on your laptop. It should be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen.
Hi, Trey. Just wanted to let you know that I'm on. So this is Tony.
Hi, folks. Just confirming that you can hear me.
I can hear you, Sergio. This is Tony. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, fantastic. I think we're having glitches just because we're all over the state, which, yeah, so it's a small problem to have. Great. So this is Sergio with the ACLU of Maryland as well. I'm our Director of Engagement, and I just want to really appreciate everyone for joining on this call, and Trey and Tony for making time to be on as well. We're going to wait one more minute and then get started. And in the meantime, again, I would just stress what Trey shared, that if you want to unmute yourself, if you have any questions or concerns, you press *6 or *67. And we really encourage this to be a conversation throughout the course of the call. So please feel comfortable chiming in as you like to.
Sergio, before we jump in, do you have that chart handy with the bill numbers? I don't have them in front of me, the ones that are available as of now. It's on box.
Yep, I'm forwarding now.
Thank you. You don't need to forward it to me. I just want to make sure somebody can look at it because I don't have it with me.
I've got it open right here, so we're good to go.
Thank you.
Cool. So with that said, it's 6:04, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I think let's just get into it. So again, this is Sergio Spania with the ACLU of Maryland. Big thanks to everyone who's joined the call so far. And again, a reminder that we'll be recording this call. And so please, once you get the email, either tomorrow or later on this week, to share with your friends that might be interested in joining us as well on Lobby Day. So the goals for this webinar in particular are going to be explicitly focused on reviewing our legislative priorities and providing any updates on where things stand. Just by looking at folks that have joined in so far, I know that we've got folks who were there on December 7th and have been tracking this work since then. A couple of folks that have been doing this work for even beforehand. So we definitely encourage folks to ask any questions or make any comments on our bill so far. And on that note, I also just, again, can't stress enough just so much I want to appreciate our Public Policy Director, Tony Holness, for being able to, answer any questions that folks have and be present, despite the fact that session is unquestionably been 12-hour days for not just the last month, but for the next couple of months. So the outline for how the event's going to go is we're going to have just a quick intro to give folks a sense on how we arrived on our priorities. Then Tony will be walking us through each of our legislative priorities so far. Then we have an explicit block of time for Q&As, but with that said, we're also totally down if folks have questions or comments on each of the different bills as they come up to please chime in. Again, just press *6 or *7. And then we'll just do some next steps, just recapping how things are looking for Lobby Day and what folks need to be up to. So before we get started, can we go to the next slide? Great. So are there any questions or comments so far? Cool. So on the legislative priority, I just wanted to stress again how we got at these efforts has been really not just a pre-session effort, but a multi-year effort, where our public policy team, led by Tony, along with the broader organization, we've been touching base with our policy partners, civic leaders, folks that actually, some of the folks who are on this call, to make sure that we're staying true to, how we can keep moving forward on our efforts and how we can build on our successful legislative efforts in years prior. And that culminates basically around the fall of the year prior into our public policy team coming together and turning then to an assurance of what our legislative priorities should be. So with that, I wanted to see if we can move to the next slide to just give a quick overview of what we'll be covering, and then I'll turn it over to Tony. So there are 6 priority efforts that we're focusing on this session. First is around getting a very strong Kerwin bill passed around race and wealth equity. Basically, this is an absolutely essential bill that will update how education will be funded. Tony will give a lot more details on all of these, so I'll be super brief. The second one is on immigrants' rights, basically figuring out how we can get a strong trust act. The third one is on voting rights, in particular for citizens of Maryland that are still behind bars but are eligible to vote. Our fourth is on women's reentry. We're trying to provide opportunities for pre-release services for Marylanders that are women to be ready to support themselves and their family. The fifth one is around police transparency and MPIA. MPIA stands for the Maryland Public Information Act. And the sixth one is defending children's right to remain silent, basically ensuring that when children are being interrogated by police, that they have the legal support necessary. So with that, we're actually going to be doing a much deeper dive than what I just shared. I just want to give folks a general overview. So Tony, I was hoping that you can get us started around where things are with Kerwin.
Sure. Thank you, Sergio. And if it's okay, Sergio, before we jump in to the issues, I just want to give a nod to the other public policy staff. They're not on the call. I get to take credit for a lot of the work they do. So Justin Nally is our education expert, and Yanette Emmanuel is taking the lead on a number of issues, including drug policy reform, and she's working on the lifers issue. Joe Spielberger is taking the lead on our immigrants' rights work, and of course, a shout out to Engagement, who I think have the funnest job, but that doesn't mean it's easy yet. So thanks to all those folks. It's not just me. I just get to be a face up for other people's work. So on Kerwin, what we've heard is that the General Assembly is going to release the bill, the policy bill that sort of translates the recommendations of the Kerwin Commission, and we expect that out at the end of the week, Thursday or Friday. I think there are two reasons that they've taken so long to get the bill out. One is that it is just taking a long time. The bill, last time I heard it, was 300 pages long, and they're not done. But also, they were doing that strategically because the policy bill is not going to have any funding mechanisms attached to it, because the funding is going to go in the budget. And what they did not want to do is release their policy bill with, all the ambitious plans that they have for fixing the education system, and allow the governor in his state of the state, which happened on Tuesday, to say, see, they haven't even figured out how they're going to pay for this. So strategically and also by necessity, they're holding until Thursday or Friday. Our team has carved out some time so that we can digest and analyze that bill as quickly as possible and get some information out to you all, so you can know, where the bill is right on the nose as far as what we're looking for and where it's coming up short. So we're in a holding pattern on Kerwin, but it may be like a wait and then hurry up fast. So that's where we are on that. Sergio, is it okay if we take questions after each issue?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but that's
sure. Oh, thank you.
Encourage folks, just in case
Yeah.
it's super burning, to please reach out. But otherwise, yeah, by all means.
Okay, no questions on Kerwin? All right. So the next issue we're going to talk about is immigrants' rights. So it is like a blessing and a curse that there are so many legislators who are now interested in immigrants' rights and the Trust Act. And I think that's more than just sort of like it's nice that they're involved. I think it really is, it demonstrates that being pro-immigrant is politically advantageous, which is really important for getting the work done, so that legislators are not sort of feeling like being pro-immigrant is a politically risky thing to do. So there are several bills. The Trust Act bills, I'll refer to them, they're like three. So there's the Full Trust Act, which is the bill that will limit law enforcement and correction in their cooperation with ICE. So this is limiting their ability to hold people past their release date, and also limiting their ability to notify ICE about someone's release date or any information about the person. That bill is going to be sponsored by Delegate David Moon and Senator Will Smith. We don't have bill numbers as of yet. We saw the bill that was drafted by Senator Smith's office last week, and Nick Steiner, our immigrants' rights attorney, worked with the folks at CASA to analyze it and send some feedback. So there's no bill out of the hopper yet, but we will let you know once that happens. The other two smaller Trust Act bills are one that requires the Attorney General to issue some guidance about how immigration law is enforced in sensitive locations, including courts, schools, and hospitals. That is sponsored by Delegate Janelle Wilkins, and I don't believe there's a Senate cross-file, but I need to do a check with her, with the delegate this week. The other smaller trust bill is one that would limit only law enforcement's cooperation with ICE. So the first big trust or full trust that I referred to applies to law enforcement and corrections. The smaller trust bill applies only to law enforcement. And that one is going to be sponsored by Delegate Jasmine Pena-Melnick from Prince George's and Anne Arundel County. And the cross-file again is Senator Will Smith. Did folks have any questions about that?
Yes, Jeff here from Greenbelt. I was wondering about the House bill numbers. Do they correspond to anything you just talked about?
Yes, I think we've got a House bill number on the Small Trust Act that limits law enforcement cooperation with ICE. Sergio, can you see that? It's Jocelyn Pena-Melnick's bill.
Yep. So Jeff is referring to the PowerPoint where we've got HB 388, HB 403. So HB 388 focuses on collaboration between ICE and law and police. HB 403 requires the AG to issue guidance on sensitive locations.
Got it. Thank you. Hi, Jeff. Jeff, you and I are on calls every night of the week, it seems. Good hearing from you again.
Yes, thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
Did folks have any other questions on the Immigrants Rights Bill? All right, I'll make a plug for one other bill, but I'm doing it a little bit hesitatingly. Delegate Vaughn Stewart from Montgomery County has introduced a bill to limit or prevent, private immigration detention centers. The reason I'm hesitating is that we haven't given it a full analysis in our office as yet, so we're holding off on making like an official recommendation. We know he's wanting to do the right thing, and you know, his intentions are definitely good, but you know, God is in the details, and so we want to take a closer look at the bill before we make any recommendations as to how folks, you know, take action on that one. All right, if there's no other questions on immigrants' rights, we can turn to voting rights. So this is the bill that would allow, require that the State Board of Election and the local boards of election set up a mechanism that allows people who are incarcerated but still have the right to vote to actually access the ballot. So, you know, getting the ballots inside, making sure there's a confidential space for them to be filled out, and getting them out confidentially and in time for the election, right? Paying for the postage, that kind of thing. So that's what this bill would do. The sponsors are Delegate Nick Mosby from Baltimore City and Senator Chris West, who's a Republican from Baltimore County. That bill does have bill numbers, and the hearings are coming up this week, next week, the 11th, February 11th. Sorry, I can't keep track of the days. Sergio, do you mind sharing the bill numbers on the voting rights bill, please?
Yeah, it's HB 568 and SB 372.
Thank you, Sergio. I'll add one thing before we open up to questions on this one. So as folks know, we work in a number of coalitions. And one thing we're particularly proud of with our Voting Rights Coalition is that we have folks who are directly impacted or have been directly impacted by the criminal justice system. So formerly incarcerated folks who are leading the effort. You know, we realize that sometimes when, you know, as the ACLU, when we are involved, no matter to what degree, whether it's a lot or like a little bit, because we've got name recognition, sometimes the effort gets branded as an ACLU effort, and you know, our partners who may not be as well-resourced or recognizable don't always get the shine that they deserve for, you know, for the work that they're doing that directly impacts themselves and their communities. So on the voting rights work, I just want to give folks just a little bit of a heads up that we are falling back, but not scaling back our commitment. So we are, you know, supporting the coalition, but in a quieter way, so that the effort can be branded and recognized by the folks who are impacted by it. You know, we have a commitment to centering the voices of directly impacted folks, and so that's what we're doing. Practically, it does not mean that we are supporting the effort any less. It just means you may not see it as an ACLU sort of, branded effort, and that's a purposeful decision that we're making. Did folks have any questions about the bill or about that coalition dynamic that I just mentioned? Okay, all right. So we can talk about women's reentry. So this is the bill, actually it's a package of 3 bills to require that corrections, the state corrections now, actually provide women with pre-release facilities and services that are adequate, but at least as equal to what the men have. So we know that men who are returning from incarceration have several facilities and services that help them to reintegrate into society, and the women have none. So that's what we're working on. Though there are 3 bills, and I'll let you know what each of them does. The first bill just changes 1 word in the state law. Right now, the law says that the Department of Corrections may operate a pre-release facility for women. We are changing that may to a shall. The second bill will put some meat on the bones, if you will, and actually define what pre-release services means. It means family reconnection, job training, any education that needs to happen, that kind of thing. And then the third bill is a little bit more complicated, but this is where it is really helpful to be informed by people who are directly impacted. Because Monica Cooper from the Maryland Justice Project, who was herself incarcerated, she mentioned to us that what she was really concerned about is that the Department of Corrections will artificially suppress the classification of women. What does that mean? It means they will, whereas a woman who's incarcerated may ordinarily be transferred down from maximum security to medium security to minimum security and then to pre-release. She fears that the department will kind of create a false bottleneck so that not as many women are going to pre-release, and therefore they don't have to provide as many pre-release to as many women. That one is a little bit complicated, but that's the thinking behind it, and it's a perfect example of why you've got to have impacted folks in the room to sort of to inform these issues, because that's something that folks who are just looking at the issue as a policy reform really probably would not have picked up on. The sponsors on the pre-release bills are Senator Mary Washington and Delegate Charlotte Crutchfield. Did folks have questions about that? I want to make sure folks are reminded to hit *6 if you'd like to speak. Otherwise, we can't hear you.
Thank you. No questions on that. It's very helpful information.
Sure, thank you. So the next issue, I believe, is police transparency and the Maryland Public Information Act. So you all will remember that Delegate Eric Barron was a sponsor of this bill last year. An arrangement was made, I suppose, and Delegate Luke Clippinger, who is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, which is good because he's a chair, and so it's, anything goes, right? However, he is less accountable to us than Delegate Barron was. And there's a specific issue that feels to be almost a deal breaker for us, and I'll tell you what it is. So right now, we are in general agreement with the chiefs and sheriffs to allow transparency over 5 categories of complaints or discipline. First, dishonesty. Second, discrimination. Third is use of force. Fourth is sexual assault. And the 5th category is criminal activity. So, when officers plant drugs or steal from members of the public. Where we are divided is that the chairman, who is the sponsor of the bill, would like to take the chiefs and sheriff's recommendation to only allow transparency over the complaints that are sustained, or the complaints where the officer is found guilty or to have done the wrong thing that they were alleged that they were charged with. We think that's really inadequate because on the numbers alone in Baltimore City, we know that between 2010 and 2015, only 2% of complaints were sustained. So if we're only going to get the sustained complaints, it's like a fraction of the universe of complaints that we're going to see. The second thing is that we are really more interested in knowing which misconduct the department did not respond to, which one, which complaints did they slow walk the investigation, not contact any witnesses, not visit the scene, not look at the body camera footage, and as a result, did not find the officer to be liable and did not sustain the complaint. The third thing I would say is that there is a real perverse incentive by only allowing transparency over the sustained complaints. So if I'm a police department and I'm looking not to disclose records, I will just not sustain them because I could not sustain the complaints and thereby avoid transparency. So we've really been working on the chairman. I know Jeff is on the call and probably some others are also participating in the Monday night police check-ins, police reform check-ins. So we've been meeting with folks who have Luke Clippinger's ear. And so we're just sort of, trying to keep a steady drumbeat so he knows that this is important to us. And we're still hopeful that he'll give and realize that we've got to have transparency over the unsustained complaints. Did folks have any questions about that? Okay. And I should mention the Senate sponsor on that bill is Senator Jill Carter. As of right now, we'll see what happens at the end of the day. The last bill that we'll talk about is defending children's right to remain silent. This bill is sponsored by Delegate Brooke Learman and Senator Jill Carter, and it's exactly what it sounds like, or what Sergio described rather. If a child is being interrogated by law enforcement, at that initial interrogation, the child has to be represented by an attorney. The child could later on decide to waive the right to an attorney, but for at least the initial interrogation, we would like the kids to be represented. And we're working in a pretty broad youth justice coalition to get that done. Did folks have any questions about that? Okay, Sergio, is it okay if I ask, I just want to hear, are these kinds of updates what folks find most helpful, or is there other information that the group would like to get from these calls?
So this is helpful. So we're going to get the legislators we're going to present this information to. This is Judy.
Hi, Judy.
Hi there.
Hi, Judy. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question.
So my question, when we go on the 17th, are we presenting this information to the legislators? Is that what we're going to be doing?
Yeah, sure. Probably with less detail. I mean, the conversation we're having right now is like an inside baseball game. I think yeah, and it will depend. And I know Sergio and Trey and the policy team will work to try and make sure you all have you guys are adequately prepped.
We'll get the talking
You guys are
Exactly.
yeah, it's like more top line. So for example, if you meet with a friendly legislator, your talking points are going to be a little bit different because maybe they don't need to be convinced on a particular issue. But we'll make sure that we're supporting you in being as responsive to what we expect you might hear from the legislator.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Hi, this is Michael David from Colombia. To be honest with you, I'm not really getting out of this presentation quite everything I was hoping to get. I'll give a couple of examples so you'll understand what's missing for me at least. When you were describing the third Tier 1 bill, I'm not getting some sort of a bullet points of what exactly is proposed in the Tier 1 bill. When you are describing the trust bill, I'm not getting a more complete information on how this relates to events that are happening at the county level. When you are talking about women's reentry and you are giving a very paltry list of what the woman may get as part of training and education, it sounds inadequate. It sounds like very minimum. Job placement, it's important, but what about fiscal responsibility, and what about healthcare resources? And it sounds like they are getting very little under these bills. How did those bills get where they are? And defending children's rights to remain silent. I have no idea definition of children's ages. I'm just not getting a complete picture of these bills. Maybe I should do more homework on my own, but I'm hoping for a bit more.
No, no worries. And thank you for that. That's really valuable. So I will tell you what my thinking has been. I've hesitated to create one-pagers which sort of summarize the actual language of the bills until they've been finalized, which only for some of them have happened really recently, and for other bills we don't even see them. And the reason for that is I think it creates confusion. So for example, I have an idea what the full Trust Act will say, but I'm not quite sure because it hasn't been filed. And I worry that if I create a one-pager that I think will be helpful and include the really important information that you're talking about, if somehow that is different from what is actually get filed, it can create some confusion. And then there's this one-pager that's floating out there that's not actually accurate. So, so what I can do for the next call then is I can try to create one-pagers that summarize what the bills do for the ones that have already been filed. Would that be helpful?
It would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Wonderful. This also, go ahead.
There's a written question from Deetra, again relating to the bill supporting youth that are being interrogated. And Deetra's question is, how will you know if the police offered a youth to have an attorney present? If they read them the rights, what's to stop them from questioning them anyway?
Sure. So this is a really important question. So because the law would require for kids to have an attorney during the interrogation, it would function the same way the same way it does in the adult context, where if the evidence was sought to be admitted at a trial, it would not be admissible. And that's how we would know, right? So we would know, if Tommy's interrogated and somehow, he ends up at a trial and the prosecutor is trying to introduce a statement that, a confession that he made, we would know that would be not admissible. We would know it happened because, they would try to admit the statement, and then we would know from Tommy, his attorney would know that he was not given the right to an attorney, and therefore that statement would not be admissible. So it's the same deterrent mechanism that exists in the adult context. Does that make sense? Was it Dietrich? Dietrich, is that it? Does that make things clear?
It makes sense, and with you saying it, but that's not always the case. They'll read you your rights and then sit there and continue to interrogate you and keep you there, interrogating you for hours. And then if they don't get a response from you 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, they'll tell you you can go home.
Right. So
and this is an adult, so I don't know,
it's even worse because, no. So here's the sort of pill that I've had to swallow as a policy advocate, is that we can reform policies and make them as ideal as possible. We cannot prevent people from, like bad actors, from not complying with the law, and that's across the board, right? I mean, we can create some deterrent, and for law enforcement, if you are an officer and you're not complying with the law, and then, all your investigations don't end in convictions because, the statements are not admissible in court, then, there should be some disciplinary function, if you will, that would discourage that kind of behavior. You're just not going to be an effective officer if you're doing that, right?
I have a question. Is there any way that you can require that it's a recording from the time they arrest them or the time they take them into the room to question them and the time they release them. This is recorded so that, you know, you can see what's exactly happening during that time frame. You know, you got a frame of reference if they were booked at such and such a time, and I don't know how long it would take from the time they would book them till they, you know, sit them down to question them, but that they would have to record that.
You know, that's a good question. So I would like to take that back to the coalition of folks that we're working on, and especially the folks in the public defender's office who actually represent kids, to sort of think through the mechanics of it, because you know, sometimes it's not really helpful to have a recording of everything. Sometimes it is, but not always, you know, and especially if the kid does not want to be recorded. So I just want to be mindful of, like, you know, mechanically how it plays out. Dietrich, can I ask you to, if you have my email address, to just like send that query my way, and I will forward it to the folks who I think are better able to respond.
Can you give that to me and also tell me how to unmute?
So I think unmute is just *6 again.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I'll tell you my email address is Holness, HOLNESS, and the extension is the same as Sergio and Therese at ACLU-MD.org.
I also put in the chat box, Teacher, so you can just copy and paste it there as well.
Oh, there it is. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sergio.
Okay, good night.
Any other questions, folks? All right. Sergio, was there something else you wanted me to chime in on, or?
Yeah, well, we're actually getting close to wrapping up, but if you just want to hold on for a couple more minutes.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything from the presentation. Can I just say thank you to everyone? Thanks everyone for listening, and I really appreciate especially the feedback about how to make these calls more helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. So just to recap, and this is for folks who weren't able to join us last night or back in December, and or be participating in some of the in-person meetings. We definitely want to encourage y'all. I mean, actually, Michael, I really appreciated your point, because fundamentally, it's very frustrating that the way in which there's some perks, but there's also very strong limitations to how our state conducts its legislative sessions, where it all boils down to 3 months. So between mid-January to early January to early April, it's a whirlwind to try to make as much progress or to try to defend as many of our rights as possible all at the same time. And as part of that, we're kind of stuck in this situation where now that it hasn't even been a month yet since session started. And so as a result, some of the bills that we've been actively working, all of which bills we've been actively working on, but some of the bills that we've been actively working on still don't have fully finalized text. That's not to say that we don't know what we want to make sure is included. And so I want to remind folks, if you haven't yet, and we'll resend the link out afterwards, but we already have some pretty detailed one-pagers on each of these legislative priorities, and that we strongly encourage you to check out beforehand. Please read and reread them. While they might not have the full points of the full language of the bills, they do get at the heart of what we're trying to make sure we can get accomplished and have strong data and support. And the reason why we're a little hesitant in getting into more details on some of the bills is particularly because they still haven't been fully drafted, and that's something that's still being worked out with the legislators, and we are hoping to have resolved. We will unquestionably have resolved by lobby day. We're hoping to have resolved as quickly as possible, ideally in the next few days. So we strongly encourage you to read and reread the one-pagers in the meantime. Also, just want to remind folks, as I hope that it came clear on this call, that we strongly encourage you all reaching out to us with any questions at any point. So, you've got Tony's email, you've got Trey and I's email, and I think myself has been sent out as well. It'll be in the next slide as well. Please reach out as it comes up. Thanks, Ray. Yeah. So the other thing is just so we're getting close on lobby day. It's 2 weeks away, a little under 2 weeks away. And we really want to make sure that we have a strong impact. So again, we appreciate everyone who's on this call, and we appreciate that y'all are going to be joining us on the 17th. We also strongly encourage you to reach out to your friends, your family members, your coworkers, to encourage them to RSVP on lobby day. There's no doubt that there's not only strength in numbers, there's long-term strength in having folks participate in these types of actions. As we covered on our Lobby 101 session last night, it's not about a one-night thing. Like, bills do not become law because, 100 folks or several hundred folks showed up that one time. They become law because it's clear that there's long-term organizing and legislative efforts that legislators cannot ignore. How we get to that point is through community building and trust building. And unquestionably, all of us on this call are sitting on the strengths of our existing networks. And so we highly encourage y'all, if you think there's a friend who's kind of on the fence but wants to get involved, to please encourage them to come join you on lobby day, and also to make sure that they actually RSVP for it, just so we are clear on what district they're coming from, so we can connect everyone to the right legislators the night of. Again, just a kind of crude reminder, but give yourself plenty of time to travel. The event starts at 6. But we're encouraging folks to get there by 5:30, just in case there are some issues with traffic. There will be a logistical email on different parking options available, and definitely encourage y'all, if you're thinking about carpooling, to reach out to us to see if we can connect you up with local other folks close by that can help out. And there's a couple more points, but I think I'm just going to skip them for now. They're already on the slide. So again, just want to really stress that we will be sending additional information over the coming week on how to plug in and how to be ready for lobby day, and that we are absolutely available as needed if there are any questions or concerns regarding not just lobby day, but just our legislative work this coming session. Please reach out to us. My email address is espana, E-S-P-A-N-A, @aclu-md.org. My personal cell is 240-478-8193. And you've got all of our email addresses from the emails that you've gotten as we've been reaching out to folks so far. So with that, I just wanted to open up again to see if there's any additional questions or comments before we close out.
Well, thank you, Sergio. You answered my questions with the last couple slides. Thank you.
Thanks, Sergio.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Talk soon.
Bye.